For the inaugural benediction, President Biden chose someone close to his family, Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman, a pastor from Wilmington, Delaware, who's known the Bidens for nearly 30 years, and echoed the themes of unity.
Let us all acknowledge, from the indigenous Native American to those who recently received their citizenship, from the African American to those whose foreparents came from Europe and every corner of the globe, from the wealthy to those struggling to make it, from every human being, regardless of their choices, that this is our country. As such, teach us, O God. As such, teach us, O God, to live in it, love in it, be healed in it, and reconcile to one another in it.
Now, coming up at the top of our next live hour of special coverage, what Biden faces in his first 100 days as president, what you need to know as well about Amanda Gorman. You can see her here posing with the Obamas, the 22-year-old poet who has really started an important conversation. We're going to hear directly from her as our special coverage continues. I'm Ari Melber. Stay with us.
With a new president in charge, Dr. Anthony Fauci is live with Rachel. How will the new administration plan to speed up the vaccine rollout, and when might we expect a return to normal? Rachel has questions. The Rachel Maddow Show, Friday at 9 on MSNBC. A new president with an ambitious agenda. Lawrence O'Donnell looks into Joe Biden's plans for the first 100 days with Chief of Staff Ron Klain and Transportation Secretary nominee Pete Buttigieg. Inside the Biden Agenda, tomorrow at 10 on MSNBC.
Welcome back to our live continuing coverage of President Joe Biden's inauguration. It is midnight on the West Coast. I'm Ari Melber. We're now 3 hours into Joe Biden's first full day as president. A live look at the White House in Washington. Today, the president focused on the COVID pandemic, planning 6 more executive orders which will deal with virus policy. He also is expected to deliver remarks and attend a briefing from science and medical teams. All of this comes after the historic day capped off with a celebration of the United States, massive fireworks, and a performance by Katy Perry. No better song during fireworks than one about fireworks. Biden took office under the constitutional calendar at noon, sworn in by the Chief Justice. He used a Bible that's been in his family since 1893 and gave an address focused on unity and his vision of America's soul.
To restore the soul and secure the future of America requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy. Unity. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We've learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed.
Kamala Harris also making history as the first black and first female vice president. President Biden went to work, 17 executive orders, many taking on Donald Trump's past actions, from climate to immigration to the pandemic. The Senate turned blue, 3 new Democrats sworn in, you see here, by the new vice president, who, of course, also oversees the Senate. We have more on that in our coverage. We bring in our experts now, Christina Greer from Fordham University, Chaitanya Komanduri, who's worked for the Obama and Clinton campaigns, and Victoria DeFrancesco Soto, Assistant Dean for Civic Engagement at the University of Texas. Good morning, depending on where everyone is, to everyone, as we turn the page. On the West Coast, Christina, when you take it all in, what will today's inaugural be remembered by?
Ari, as I said before, I'm still processing everything that happened today. But I think, this is the first time we have a Democratic representation from the West Coast We've got our first Latinx senator from the West Coast, which means something. We've got a Jewish American senator from Georgia, and then Reverend Warnock as well from the state of Georgia. I think it's a culmination of a lot of hard work. And today or yesterday, January 20th, was a day of celebration, as it should be. But there's a lot of hard work ahead, especially for Democrats, to make sure that they can maintain the Senate and the House, but also to really assist Joe Biden as we try and fight coronavirus, as we try and figure out how to disseminate the vaccine. I'm in New York, and we've run out already. And so we're hoping for some relief. People are very worried about their parents, obviously, who should be first in line to get the vaccine. And then, to assist Joe Biden in thinking about the best way to move us forward economically, to say nothing of dealing with the fallout of the last 4 years and January 6th and what we're going to do with the insurrectionists who still exist in our country. Donald Trump may be watching television in Florida, but many of his supporters still believe that he should be in Washington, D.C., and they want to uphold many of the policies that I found reprehensible, but that they firmly believe in. And so there's a cautious optimism that I have, and there's a pragmatic patience that I'll have. But the next few months will be really crucial for the American public.
Well, the contrast you mentioned goes, Che, to the fact that while this was technically a peaceful transfer of power, because many of our institutions held, that was against the efforts of the insurrectionist Christina cites. It was against the election lie the ex-president pushed. And he also, of course, boycotted today in a last act of extreme pettiness. And not that he would have been all that welcome, but it might have been a chance to turn a page. He didn't do that. We do have news, courtesy of the new administration, Press Secretary Psaki, that there was the traditional letter exchange. Take a listen.
I was with him when he was reading the letter in the Oval Office right before he signed the executive actions, was that this is a letter that was private, as he said to you all. It was both generous and gracious, and it was just a reflection of him not planning to release the letter unilaterally, but I wouldn't take it as an indication of a pending call with the former president.
So, Che, the one little piece of info we have there is that tradition was upheld. We do not know. I want to be clear with you, Che, and viewers. We do not know whether it was written in a comically large Sharpie or a traditional pen. We do not know if it was typewritten or written in a comically large Sharpie. We don't know if it was written in crayon or a comically large Sharpie. Right. The latter being the only that are roughly comparable. And we also don't know, Che, whether this was something that the ex-president understood to be a tradition worth upholding and dashed it off, or whether it had to be somehow lobbied or explained to him, perhaps that it was like a series of DMs, and having lost Twitter, whether perhaps it was more appealing when explained that way. Those are things we do not know. But your thoughts, Che?
Yeah, first of all, I was genuinely shocked to find out that he did leave a letter. I was expecting that he would not do that. I believe it was leaked that he was not going to do that. And I feel that he kind of did that just to spite all the people who said that he wasn't going to do that. I feel like that's a big part of Donald Trump's thinking.
The double reverse spite, sure. Hard to pull off,
right.
but if you spend your time thinking it through, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to cast aspersions on what might be in the letter, but I wouldn't read too much into Jen Psaki and President Biden saying it was generous and gracious, but we're not going to talk about it right now. It seems like Joe Biden is somebody who really wants to put Donald Trump in the rearview mirror and saying, hey, it was a generous, gracious letter, but, I'm not going to divulge it. That seems like a very diplomatic way of sort of putting the issue behind you.
Well, let's get into it because we are in our overnight coverage. We have the time. From a press perspective, was generous too strong a word if it was an exaggeration? They could have simply told reporters the ex-president said what he said.
They could have, but I also think you have to look at the tenor of the day. The tenor of the day and the tone that Biden had struck was one of unity, one of graciousness, one of respect to individuals who do not share your views. He said very strongly that he will be present for all Americans, and he dedicated a section of the speech to people who did not vote for him. So I think that what you've said in terms of just sort of giving a blanket statement, oh, you just give us a letter, we won't say any more of it, it wouldn't be keeping with the tone. I think saying it's generous and gracious keeps with the tone.
That's fair.
Victoria? And I will also say that it was a tremendous pleasure for me today to not have to deal with Donald Trump or his tweets. I mean, can you imagine if he was still on Twitter, how much enjoyment it would have sapped from watching this great ceremony? I was really very happy that was something that did not occur.
Did you check Parler?
No, I first of all, I have an iPhone, so I cannot even download the app if I wanted to. But that's a whole other issue for perhaps another time. But no, I did not check Parler. I don't plan to check Parler because there's not really very much on Parler that I'm interested in checking out.
Victoria?
So I was also surprised that Donald Trump left a letter. And if I were a betting woman, Ari, I would think that it was written out in a Sharpie. That is my guess here. But in terms of what this means, I think, a dispatch from Red America. I'm here in Texas, and I am in the middle of a Red Sea. So we can't lose sight of the fact that 80 to 90% of Republicans still support Donald Trump, and that 70-ish% of Republicans still think that Joe Biden was not actually elected, that the election was not valid. So these are very real issues that Joe Biden is confronting. And it's something that we have to be aware of the clock, because right now there's a space for unity. We have a Democratic Congress, a Democratic White House, but in about a year, we're going to be in the thick of primaries. And we know that in primary season, both Republicans and Democrats run to the extremes. And we're going to see the Republican Party, as we come up on that primary system, run to those extremes. So whatever unity that Joe Biden needs to lock down for this country has to happen in the next 7 to 8 months, because the clock is ticking. And while he's doing that, even though he may have Congress kind of on his side, you have states like Texas, other red states that have already pledged to go on the offensive. Let's not forget that the governor of Texas, when he was AG, said that his job every day was to wake up and sue the Obama administration. So I don't want us to lose sight of that calendar and the clock that's ticking.
As for what Biden is doing with his new powers, Che, take a listen to him discussing the executive orders.
And these are just all starting points. And we're going to, in the process of rebuilding the economy, do what I said throughout the campaign and while running, rebuild the backbone of the country, the middle class. And so there's going to be a lot of focus on that. And I think some of the things we're going to be doing are bold and vital. And there's no time to start like today.
Jay?
Yeah, the thing that I thought was most striking about that was how in a matter of hours, not a matter of minutes, Joe Biden was really able to undo the Trump policy legacy or whatever there was of it. I mean, normally a president's policy legacy is something the president that follows him really has to work around, spend a lot of energy tackling. One of the best examples, for example, is Eisenhower largely keeping the New Deal intact after he took power. Joe Biden doesn't have to worry about that because there really is no policy legacy for Donald Trump. There's no accomplishments that he has to worry about. There's nothing that Trump really did that was so popular that Joe Biden has to keep it in place. Yeah. None of that really is in the offing. I mean, Joe Biden has a large mess to clean up, but policy-wise, he has something of a clean slate to really undo everything that Trump has done in terms of regulatory system.
It's a great point. Let me put it to Victoria. I mean, I haven't heard it put so bluntly, and people are busy with a lot of other things, but whether you contrast that to Obamacare or even in foreign policy, when you have wars or things that really saddle the next administration, Victoria, I think Che draws our attention back to the fact that in these 4 years, when it comes to the things that can't just be undone by executive order, but that are legislative structural policy, You have tax cuts, and that can still be dealt with. And you had what was a relatively incremental criminal justice reform in the First Step Act that was somewhat diluted, didn't do a ton, quite frankly. And so to the extent that they did anything with that, I imagine they would try to build on it, do more. And there's not much else to speak of legislatively, Victoria.
There's not much legislatively. As we know, there was a ton in terms of executive orders, but what there was a lot of, Ari, and I'm going to get into the policy weeds here, is regulatory changes. And I'm speaking from my area, one of my areas of expertise, which is in immigration. So, you know, we saw the Muslim ban and we saw the border wall, but it was these little tweaks that the Trump administration did through the leadership of Stephen Miller, of saying, for example, changing the criteria for green card holders to be able to get citizenship if they had ever accessed any public services. So stuff that doesn't require legislative approval and stuff that isn't of executive orders, but that can be done just through agency rule changes, but has very real effects on people's lives. That happened in spades during the Trump administration. That can be undone, but it's going to take a long time to unwind the close to 400 plus immigration-related changes that the Trump administration put into place.
Both points of policy nuance, so we appreciate that. As we go late into the night, we learn more and more about our guests. Legacy MSNBC viewers may remember when Michael Steele busted out the Muppet that he got from The Daily Show. Last hour, we learned the names of guests' mothers, including Christina. And just now we've learned, as we go into the early morning hours, that Chaitanya Komanduri, former Obama campaign aide, is not on Parler. So we learn as we go. I want to thank... It's true?
That is correct. That is
correct.
one social media app. Yes, it's true.
We learn as we go. I want to thank Che and Victoria for staying up late with us. Christina Greer stays up even later as our live coverage continues. I am going to fit a break. But as promised, we're going to play for you the full performance from a 22-year-old phenom who truly amazed the nation and many around the world today with her poetry and her vision. Also, later, the reckoning for Republicans in this new era and highlights from President Biden's inaugural. If you're waking up or you had a weird day and you want to see some of that, later in our special coverage, we're going to show you just some of the best parts so you know what you might have missed.
How are you, sir? It's good to see you.
You got to keep doing this.
I know. It's been 3 hours. How does it feel, Mr. President?
It feels great.
It feels good?
It feels good.
All righty. Dr. Biden, thank you.